The quiet hum of the heating was the only sound in the dim living room as I sat curled in the corner of the worn-out couch, the soft weight of a blanket wrapped around me. Outside, the late autumn wind rattled the window panes, but inside, the silence was louder, heavier. At 43, I've become the invisible thread holding the Lee family tapestry together, the one who pays the bills no one discusses, the mediator who soothes tempers without complaint. I think about last Christmas, a night that still stings like fresh frostbite. I forked out $2,500 for the dinner, the gifts, the decorations, each dollar a quiet sacrifice no one acknowledged, and yet it was the words that cut deepest. Raymond, my brother Lucas's wife, the family's sly serpent, stood in the middle of the living room, her smile gleaming with cruel intent. She called my 6-year-old daughter Grace, the ugly cousin, in front of everyone, as if it was some twisted joke. I remember how Grace's small body trembled as she fled into my arms, her tears warm against my chest. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to be calm, to be steady, because I knew any confrontation would only escalate the venom Raymond so skillfully injected. I held Grace close, whispering, "You're beautiful, always," even as my own heart shattered in silence. That moment, beneath the polished veneer of family smiles, I saw the simmering storm. Raymond's facade never quite reached her eyes. There was a calculating shadow lurking beneath that charm. And now, with Thanksgiving approaching, I braced myself for the annual battleground, where smiles would mask the undercurrents of resentment and manipulation. There's a secret power I hold close, the meticulous ledger I've kept for years, a record of every dollar I've poured into this family's life. It's my quiet rebellion, a testament to the sacrifices they refuse to see. But for now, I sit in the quiet, wondering how much longer I can bear the weight of being the forgotten one. I often drift back to my childhood, tracing the roots of the family's fractured dynamic. Mom, Helen, had her favorites. There was no denying it. My younger brother, Lucas, was the golden child, the one who received lavish praise and financial support without question. I remember watching him walk through our house, his college tuition paid in full by Mom, while I juggled part-time jobs just to cover my own school supplies and necessities. I was 16 when I bought my own notebooks and pens, and Mom looked at me with that familiar, strained smile, saying, "You're the responsible one, Maeve. You always manage." At the time, I thought it was a compliment, but now, I realize it was a veiled expectation, a burden disguised as praise. The family relied on me to sacrifice without complaint, to absorb the imbalance as if it were my duty. Over the years, this pattern deepened, etched into every family gathering and conversation. Then Raymond entered our lives, her arrival stirring the stagnant waters. Charming on the surface, she wielded subtle sabotage like a weapon, undermining my contributions, twisting narratives, planting seeds of doubt among relatives. I recall family dinners where her casual remarks about my over-involvement or trying too hard landed like ice shards. It wasn't outright cruelty, not at first, but it chipped away at my standing, making me question if my efforts were ever truly seen or valued. The dysfunction had many faces, but the most painful was the silence, the unspoken hierarchy that kept me on the sidelines, forever the caretaker, never the center. The sacrifices I've made for this family could fill volumes. I remember the wedding of Lucas and Raymond, a day meant to celebrate love but shadowed by the cost I bore. I covered $12,000 of their wedding gifts I chose, purchased, wrapped, and delivered, never so much as a thank you. Then, there were Grace's private school tuition fees, $15,000 over 5 years, paid entirely out of my own pocket because Raymond refused to contribute, insisting that education was our responsibility, referring to Marcus and me. Family vacations, too, have been quietly bankrolled by me. $8,000 spent on trips that everyone enjoyed but no one acknowledged as my gift. Mom and Lucas treated these expenditures as if they were expected, as if my generosity was a standard, not a sacrifice. "That's just Maeve," they'd say, dismissing my efforts with a shrug. Through it all, Marcus has been my constant, a steady hand and voice of reason. He sees through the family's veiled neglect and encourages me to stand firm, to stop being the pushover I've been trained to be since childhood. He reminds me I deserve respect, that my worth isn't measured by silent sacrifices. It's Marcus who helped me start the ledger, that secret weapon I've held close. A comprehensive spreadsheet detailing every contribution, every dollar, every date, each receipt carefully filed. It's my record, my quiet rebellion waiting for the right moment. Though I haven't wielded it yet, its existence fuels the flicker of defiance growing inside me. I'm tired of being invisible, tired of the emotional toll masked by forced smiles. The first time Raymond humiliated me publicly, I felt something inside crack. It was last year's Thanksgiving dinner. A night meant for gratitude turned into a painful display of family cruelty. As the room filled with chatter and clinking glasses, Raymond's voice sliced through the noise with a cruel joke aimed at Grace. Maybe Grace will grow out of being the ugly cousin, but it's a long road. The room froze. Even the laughter died. Grace's face crumpled, tears spilling as she darted into my arms. I forced a smile, masking the sting that surged like acid in my chest, and gently wiped her cheeks, whispering, "You're beautiful, always." Around us, the family's eyes flickered with discomfort. Mom, Lucas, aunts, and uncles all exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. The silence felt like a verdict, a tacit acceptance of Raymond's cruelty. I wanted to shout, to defend Grace and myself, but years of conditioned endurance held me back. I rationalized Raymond's words as bitter jealousy disguised as humor, convincing myself that confrontation would only deepen the family's fractures. Yet, beneath that rationalization, a seed of doubt took root. Maybe my quiet acceptance, my endless endurance, wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to stop shrinking and start standing. The warmth of Grace's tears against my skin was a painful reminder. This wasn't just about me. It was about protecting the innocence I'd fought so hard to preserve. And though I didn't say it out loud, I felt the first flicker of something fierce awakening inside me. The moment Raymond caught the flicker of defiance in my eyes, the air shifted. It was subtle at first, just a glance, a tightening of her smile. But soon, the undercurrent of tension rippled through every interaction. That evening, at a small family dinner, I noticed how Raymond began weaving her poison with finesse. She leaned in close to Mom one night, her voice soft, but carrying that unmistakable edge. "Maeve's always been too sensitive," she said, the words dripping with false sweetness. "She's always playing the victim, expecting thanks for things she barely does." I wasn't invited into that conversation, but the sting landed hard when I overheard Mom repeating those phrases later, shaking her head with a sigh. It was as if I'd suddenly become the problem, the one demanding attention where none was deserved. Raymond's campaign wasn't limited to whispered comments. She rallied a small circle, relatives who hadn't known the full story, painting me as overbearing, ungrateful, and even self-centered. Lucas, as usual, remained mute on the phone when I called, brushing off the tension with vague excuses about being busy. The few family members who once offered me quiet support began to pull away, uncertain which side to take. The gaslighting was relentless. Raymond would insist that my enormous financial contributions were exaggerated, that family always puts each other first, and that I never really did anything special. It was disorienting, like being trapped in a room where the walls kept closing in, and every attempt to explain myself was met with disbelief or dismissal. One evening, I sat in my kitchen, the cold hum of the refrigerator the only sound as I stared at my phone, the unanswered messages glaring back at me. I felt the weight of isolation settle deeper, a gnawing ache that mixed with the familiar exhaustion. I thought of Grace, innocent in all this, suffering from the undercurrents she barely understood. Raymond's subtle cruelty toward my daughter felt like a direct blow to my heart. The family atmosphere had become toxic, a battlefield of smiles and hidden daggers, and my allies were disappearing one by one. In the face of this, I realized that my quiet endurance was no longer a shield. It was a vulnerability Raymond exploited with precision. But despite the pain, I clung to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to mend these fractures before they tore us all apart. With the storm gathering, I decided to face it head-on. I asked Marcus to help me arrange a family meeting. just the four of us. Mom, Lucas, Raymond, and me. I wanted a peaceful resolution, a chance to lay everything out calmly and honestly. On the day, my hands trembled slightly as I placed my meticulously organized folder of receipts, emails, and spreadsheets on the dining table. I spoke slowly, carefully, showing how over the years I had quietly covered thousands of dollars for family events, education, and support. I shared the burden I had carried, not to boast but to seek acknowledgement and fairness. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in Mom's eyes, but it was fleeting. Raymond's smile curled into something colder as she seized the moment. "Maeve's just keeping score," she said, her voice sharp with accusation, trying to control the family, making it all about her. Mom quickly looked away, deflecting with tired words about family unity and the importance of forgiveness. Lucas nodded silently, offering no support, his silence louder than any defense. Our cousin, who had agreed to mediate, glanced between us with an awkward smile, urging, "Let's just forgive and move forward. We don't need to dig into the past." The weight of their dismissal crushed me. I left the meeting drained, my heart heavy with the realization that facts held no power in a house ruled by denial and favoritism. I wanted to believe peace was possible, but that day showed me how fragile and skewed our family's sense of fairness truly was. A few weeks later, at the annual family reunion, the tension was palpable. I arrived with the hope that the wounds could still heal, that perhaps time had softened Raymond's sharp edges. But as the gathering unfolded, that hope shattered. Raymond, in front of a crowd that included distant relatives and neighbors, let her venom slip freely. "There's Maeve," she said loudly, with a laugh that carried across the room. "The family ATM who thinks she's owed something." The words hit like a slap, sharp and public. For a brief moment, the buzz of conversation died down, eyes flicking toward me. Among those watching was a local community leader who had praised my volunteer work at the school, someone whose respect I valued deeply. I felt my face flush as whispers spread like wildfire. Marcus clenched his jaw beside me, his hand tightening around mine, urging me to speak up, to stand tall, but I stayed silent, swallowing the sting, holding back tears. I still clung to the fragile hope that confrontation would only deepen divides, that peace required patience. But as I watched the ripple of judgment, I felt my reputation, painstakingly built on kindness and dedication, unravel under the weight of Raymond's cruelty. That night, the humiliation wasn't just social. It seeped into the core of my self-worth. I wondered if the family saw me as anything more than a wallet, a scapegoat, a punching bag. Beneath the surface, the wounds deepened, infecting my spirit with doubt and sorrow. In the quiet that followed, I sat at my desk, pen trembling in hand as I poured my heart into a letter. I addressed it to Mom and Lucas first, my words raw with exhaustion and longing for acknowledgement. I reminded them of the years I had sacrificed, the love I had silently poured into our family without complaint. I asked, pleadingly, for fairness, for recognition, not just of money, but of the emotional labor I carried. To Raymond, I wrote directly, requesting an apology to Grace, to make amends for the cruelty that had wounded my daughter's spirit. I ended with a simple truth: we can only heal if we face the truth. Mailing the letter felt like casting a message into a stormy sea, hoping it wouldn't be lost. But when I heard how Raymond had reacted, calling me dramatic and insisting I needed to learn my place, the weight of rejection crushed me anew. Mom's warning echoed in my ears. "Don't rock the boat, Maeve. Some things are better left unspoken." The line had been crossed so clearly, so definitively. My hope for family, for understanding, lay shattered beneath their silence and cruelty. In that moment, I understood the painful truth. They preferred the quiet damage of denial over the messy truth of respect, and I was left standing, more alone than ever, grappling with the knowledge that the family I had given everything to might never see me as more than the invisible one. The days after I sent that letter felt like I'd stepped into a void. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread, and family gatherings turned icy. At the grocery store, I'd catch distant glances from relatives who once greeted me warmly, now curt nods or polite avoidance. The warmth I'd painstakingly built over the years vanished overnight. Marcus tried to rally me to push harder. "They can't just ignore you?" he said. But even his words felt futile against the cold front Raymond had organized. She was everywhere, whispering, smiling, twisting the story so that I looked like the villain, unstable, overly sensitive, even selfish. I'd never felt so small. The worst part was watching Grace retreat into herself. At school, she stopped inviting friends over, and at home, she barely spoke, clutching her books like a shield. One evening, I found her in her room, tears spilling silently as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her little voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Mom, why do they say I'm ugly?" The words shattered me. How had it come to this? I questioned everything. My worth, my judgment, my place in this family I'd given so much to. Was I really the problem? The relentless isolation gnawed at my spirit, but somewhere beneath the ache, a stubborn ember glowed. I refused to let this be my end. Thanksgiving arrived like a storm I wasn't prepared for, but this time, the damage was undeniable. The dining room was crowded, laughter filling the space, but beneath it, an electric tension pulsed. Raymond's voice cut through the noise again, sharp and cruel as ever. "Maybe Grace will grow out of being the ugly cousin, but it's a long road," she sneered, loud enough for the whole table to hear. The room fell deathly silent, eyes darting uncomfortably. Grace's face crumpled and she fled to my side, tears streaming down her cheeks. I wrapped her in my arms, forcing a brave smile, but inside, my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Unbeknownst to anyone, my phone lay on the table, still recording from an earlier call. The words, the tone, the merciless mockery were captured in cold, undeniable clarity. Even as family members witnessed the scene, no one intervened, frozen in their discomfort or unwilling to challenge the cruelty. Marcus squeezed my hand, urging me quietly to speak up, to fight back. But I held back, my voice caught in a choke of disbelief and sorrow. This moment, devastating, exposed, public, was a fracture that split something deep within me. My old self, the silent sufferer, the patient caretaker, broke apart, leaving a fierce, unyielding core of resolve in its wake. In the silence that followed the dinner, I lay awake, replaying the recording over and over. Each time, the raw cruelty echoed louder, no longer muffled by polite family facades or distracting smiles. I thought about every dinner I'd paid for, every school fee, every family emergency I'd quietly absorbed. For years, I'd been invisible, my sacrifices unseen, my pain dismissed. It wasn't exhaustion that filled me now. It was anger, sharp and pure, burning away the confusion and self-doubt. This wasn't accidental neglect or fleeting unkindness. It was a sustained, deliberate assault on my dignity and worth. Raymond's calculated sabotage, Mom's blind favoritism, Lucas's silence, it all formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. "Never again," I whispered to the darkness. The pain that once crushed me transformed into power. This was not just about me. It was about protecting Grace, reclaiming my voice, and demanding the respect I deserved. For the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of strength, not the fragile hope of before, but a steady, unbreakable fire. That night, I sat across from Marcus, the recording playing softly on my phone between us. I laid out my plan, voice steady though my hands trembled. "I'm done being the family scapegoat," I said quietly but firmly. Marcus nodded, his eyes full of unwavering support. "You've got the facts? The receipts?" he reminded me. "It's time to use them. But we need to be smart, proportional, strategic. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth." We talked late into the night, outlining steps, a financial audit to expose the exploitation, gathering support quietly, preparing for confrontation without drama. I felt a shift inside me, from victim to strategist, from weary to resolute. The ledger I'd kept for years wasn't just a list of numbers. It was my weapon, my shield, my testament. Marcus's calm presence grounded me, turning my anger into a plan. Tomorrow, I would start building the case, piece by piece. I was no longer invisible. I was ready to fight for the respect and justice I, and Grace, deserved. Late into one restless night, Marcus and I sat huddled over the dining table, the dim light casting shadows across stacks of papers and spreadsheets I'd collected over the years. Each receipt, each bank statement, and every email confirming my financial support for the family lay spread before us like pieces of a puzzle long ignored. I traced my finger over lines showing payments for household repairs in the old family home, property taxes on inherited land that Lucas and Raymond had practically treated as their own, and countless small expenses for gatherings and emergencies that had slipped under their radar. The sum was staggering. More than $75,000 quietly funneled into the family's pockets, with no acknowledgement, no thanks, just expectation. My throat tightened as I realized how deeply they depended on me, how blind they were to the ledger I had kept, how vulnerable they were to the truth I now wielded. We brought in a trusted accountant, someone utterly impartial and professional, to help us decipher the financial tangle. Sitting in his cramped office, the scent of old coffee and paper thick in the air, we listened as he pointed out exactly how the money traced back to me, how the family home's upkeep was virtually impossible without my contributions, and how the taxes on the properties tied directly to inheritance could become liabilities if unaddressed. My heart raced at the thought that Raymond and Lucas, so quick to dismiss me, were unknowingly shackled to my generosity. The accountant's words gave me clarity I hadn't dared to hope for. Leverage. They needed me far more than I had ever imagined, and that knowledge carved out a fresh space of power inside me. It was no longer desperation. It was strategy. Back home, I hovered over the ledger again, the numbers etched in my mind like a secret map. Marcus sat beside me, his hand occasionally brushing mine, steady and reassuring. "You've built the family's foundation," he said softly, "and now it's time they realize it." His voice was calm, but beneath it, I felt the fierce pulse of determination stirring. I looked at the worn receipts, each one a testament to sacrifices made silently, a chronicle of years spent putting others first. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I was the cornerstone, and with that, the weight I'd carried for so long began to feel less like a burden and more like armor. The ledger wasn't just proof, it was my shield and my sword. That night, as the house settled into quiet, a new resolve hummed in my veins. The family's dependence on me was no longer a secret I'd hide or be ashamed of. It was the key to balance the scales. I closed the ledger slowly, a faint smile touching my lips despite the exhaustion weighing down my limbs. For the first time in years, I felt ready, not just to be seen, but to be heard, to reclaim what had been taken, piece by piece. In the weeks that followed, I moved like a ghost through the house, keeping the facade of normalcy while weaving my plan quietly beneath the surface. I spent hours at my desk, compiling folders filled with bank statements, receipts, and carefully saved emails, every shred of evidence I might need. Each document I scanned and backed up felt like a small act of rebellion, a way to take back control. I changed passwords on the shared family accounts we'd used for expenses, locking out Raymond and Lucas without a hint of alarm. My fingers trembled slightly as I set up a confidential digital folder with the accountant, ensuring that nothing could be erased or denied. Every step was deliberate, every move careful to avoid raising suspicion. The family still saw me as the quiet one, the caretaker who would never rock the boat. Marcus became my closest ally in the shadows. We held hushed conversations late at night, rehearsing the calm, measured tone I would use when the time came to confront them. I practiced speaking clearly, without anger, but with unwavering resolve. He reminded me to breathe, to steady my voice, to hold my ground, no matter how their denials tried to chip away at my confidence. "You're not just standing up for yourself," he said. "You're protecting Grace, and that makes you unstoppable." His faith in me was a balm for the bruised edges of my spirit, and I clung to it fiercely. Outside, life carried on. The family gatherings continued with their usual routines. The same forced smiles and polite small talk. Raymond's presence still loomed, her two-faced charm masking the silent tension growing beneath the surface. No one suspected a thing. To them, I was still the dependable sister, the woman who quietly paid for everything and said nothing. But beneath that mask, I was steel. I walked through the house with my head held high, careful to hide the storm building inside, waiting for the right moment to strike. Each day, the ledger and the evidence I'd gathered grew heavier in my mind, a weight of truth waiting to be unleashed. I found a strange sort of solace in this secret preparation, a sense of control I hadn't known in years. The quiet calm before the storm was mine, and I was ready to own it. One humid afternoon, drawn by a restless impulse, I climbed into the attic of the old family home, a space rarely visited, and thick with dust and the scent of old memories. Light filtered through the small window, illuminating boxes stacked haphazardly, relics of a past I'd mostly ignored. As I rifled through yellowing files and brittle papers, my fingers brushed against a sealed envelope, thick with age but recently disturbed. Inside, I found a packet of legal documents, a recently updated will, and a confidential letter penned by our late grandfather. My breath hitched. The letter wasn't just a formality. It was a candid, scathing critique of Raymond's behavior, calling out her two-faced ways and warning of breaches of trust that could fracture the family's legacy. The will was even more shocking. It detailed that a significant portion of the family estate, the properties, the assets, was entrusted not to Lucas or Raymond, but to me, contingent upon my continued care and support of the family. It was a binding clause, with oversight mechanisms that could challenge their current control if they overstepped. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. Here was the legal anchor I had been searching for, hidden in plain sight, a safeguard placed by a man who had seen through Raymond's facades long before I did. My hands trembled as I traced the lines of the letter, the weight of its words sinking in. This discovery was more than a twist. It was a game changer. Suddenly, the leverage I'd found in the ledger was dwarfed by the power this legal document gave me. Raymond's grip on the family fortune was far more fragile than she realized. The letter's tone, so personal and damning, underscored the depth of distrust that had quietly festered for years. I felt a surge of both fear and exhilaration. The stakes had just risen, and my mission was no longer just about acknowledgement or respect. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine and protecting my daughter's future from those who sought to undermine us. Clutching the documents, I slipped them into my bag, heart pounding with the knowledge that everything had changed. With the dawn, I began my first moves carefully, like a chess player nudging pawns into position. I stopped the automatic transfers I'd set up for household repairs and family gifts, watching as maintenance requests went unanswered, and the familiar hum of activity around the old house began to falter. I notified the accountant to start a discreet audit of shared family expenses, signaling that the quiet generosity I'd offered was no longer on the table. Then, with deliberate calm, I sent formal letters to Helen and Lucas. In them, I outlined in precise detail the years of financial support I had provided, attaching copies of the ledger and requesting reimbursement. The tone was measured, not accusatory, just truth laid bare. I made it clear this was a step toward fairness, a necessary reckoning. Raymond's reaction was predictably dismissive. She waved off my letters as a passing mood, a temporary frustration, her smile as false and sharp as ever. Lucas remained silent, offering no defense or apology, as though waiting to see which way the wind would blow. The rest of the family seemed unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the shifting ground beneath their feet. But I watched closely, sensing the first fractures as household maintenance stalled. The leaky roof went unrepaired, the garden grew wild, and invitations to family gatherings became sparse and strained. Murmurs of discontent stirred quietly at the edges, hushed whispers of, "What's Maeve doing?" and "Why is she pulling away?" I kept my face serene, meeting their confusion with a steady gaze, refusing to be drawn into old patterns of apology or explanation. For the first time, I was no longer the silent provider, but the architect of change. The dominoes had been set in motion, though they didn't see it yet, and as I watched the cracks deepen, a cold satisfaction settled in my bones. The family dynamics were shifting, subtly but irrevocably, and I was ready to meet whatever came next with unshakable resolve. The evening air was crisp with the promise of change as we gathered around the long dining table, the soft glow of fairy lights casting delicate shadows over familiar faces. New Year's Eve had always been a carefully choreographed event, a performance of smiles and forced cheer. But tonight, a quiet tension hummed beneath the surface. I sat still for a moment, sensation prickling along my skin. Nervous, yes, but surer than I'd been in years. The family was here. Helen with her tight-lipped smile, Lucas looking unusually pale, and Raymond, always radiant enough to disarm, with her eyes flickering like a cornered cat's. Marcus gave my hand a reassuring squeeze beneath the table. This was my moment. When the last course was cleared, and the room settled into a lull, I stood, the chair scraping softly against the wooden floor. "I have something I need to share," I began, voice even but carrying a weight that made heads turn. The room quieted, curiosity flickering in every eye. I tapped my phone, and the clip played, a sharp, raw recording of Raymond's voice, dripping with venom as she mocked Grace's innocence, her words slicing through the festive facade like a blade. The room stiffened, breath caught in throats. Helen gasped, clutching her napkin. Lucas's face drained of color. Raymond blinked, caught, her practiced charm cracking. I didn't rush. Instead, I moved to the next revelation, pulling out a thick folder. The financial audit I'd painstakingly assembled, laid bare across the table. Receipts, bank statements, and spreadsheets detailed the $75,000 I'd poured into family events, household repairs, and emergencies, all without so much as a thank you. "I've kept these records for years," I said, voice steady. While my contributions were ignored or dismissed, a hush fell, the weight of truth pressing down hard. Then came the final blow. I shared the contents of grandfather's will, revealing the legal protections that bound the family's estate to my continued care and support. The implications were undeniable. Raymond's control was fragile, resting on shaky ground she'd tried so desperately to conceal. The room erupted, not with anger, but shock, disbelief, and an unspoken realignment of power. Raymond stammered weak protests, but I cut through the noise, eyes clear and voice firm. "No longer will I be invisible or exploited. This ends now." The air shifted. The room belonged to me. For the first time, I saw respect flicker in their eyes, an acknowledgement I'd waited a lifetime to hear. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, a boundary drawn in the sand. I sat again, heart pounding but calm, knowing the fight had truly begun. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was reclaiming my dignity, my family, and my future. The days after that night were like watching a fortress crumble from within. The carefully constructed facade Raymond had maintained shattered beneath the weight of her own words, and the unassailable evidence I'd laid before everyone. Helen demanded answers, her voice sharp with confusion and hurt, seeking to understand how she'd missed the truth for so long. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, caught between loyalty and the undeniable facts that now stained the family's narrative. The family dynamic, once rigid and unchallenged, fractured visibly. Raymond's attempts to downplay the revelations were pitiful. She smiled too brightly, offered half-hearted apologies that rang hollow, and promised to make things right, without any real change behind her words. I listened, unmoved. I'd learned that empty promises were a tool of manipulation, a way to buy silence and forgiveness without real accountability. "I'm not interested in reconciliation without honesty," I told her quietly but firmly. The room felt heavier with each failed excuse she offered. Her web of deceit unraveled, thread by thread. Lucas, who had long been a silent observer, now began to speak in subtle shifts. Small acknowledgments here, a hesitant apology there. The family's hierarchy was no longer the same. The power balance had tipped irreversibly. I saw the beginnings of respect in Helen's eyes, slow and reluctant, but genuine enough to suggest change. The once unassailable grip Raymond held loosened, and for the first time, I felt the weight of invisibility lift, replaced by a quiet authority that steadied me. Yet, as the old order crumbled, Raymond's desperation grew. She mobilized allies, whispering half-truths and sowing discord where she could. Rumors spiraled, a blend of bitterness and falsehood designed to isolate me, to fracture the fragile support I'd gained. She even threatened legal action, attempting to contest the will and discredit the audit. I saw the familiar patterns of manipulation resurface, but this time, I was prepared. Marcus stood firmly by my side, unwavering even as the pressure mounted. Together, we met every challenge with documented proof, legal advice, and an emotional steadiness that made her tactics crumble. When relatives approached Marcus with veiled warnings or pleas to reconsider, he responded not with anger, but with calm clarity, refusing to be drawn into the drama. The factions within the family began to dissolve, Raymond's influence shrinking with every failed ploy. Her isolation was palpable. The once vibrant social butterfly now fluttered nervously at the edges of gatherings, her smiles tight and strained. Invitations faded, conversations hushed when she entered the room, and her words carried less weight. The power she'd wielded for so long dissolved into silence. Watching her retreat was bittersweet. It was a victory hard won, but no celebration would come at the cost of family peace. Still, I felt the quiet satisfaction of truth prevailing, of justice carefully and deliberately applied. As the dust settled, I found myself standing in a space I hadn't known was possible: peace. The tension that had gripped my shoulders loosened, replaced by a steadiness that came from knowing I'd reclaimed my dignity and my family's respect. Marcus and Grace became my anchors, our bond deepened by the trials we'd faced and overcome. Grace's laughter, once overshadowed by silent cruelty, now filled our home with hope and light. Helen, slow to change but sincere in small gestures, began to acknowledge my sacrifices openly, her eyes no longer clouded by favoritism, but softened by understanding. The family gatherings, once battlegrounds of tension and unspoken resentments, started to feel less fraught. Though Raymond remained a shadow on the periphery, her diminished role was a quiet reminder of the cost of deceit. I often sit in those moments of calm, reflecting on the path that led me here, the years of silence, the pain, the quiet endurance that had nearly broken me. But more than that, I feel the strength that now flows through me, the power of voice reclaimed, boundaries firmly set, and love fiercely protected. This is not the end of our story, but a new beginning. Thanksgiving looms ahead, and while it promises another gathering, it no longer feels like a war zone. Instead, it is an opportunity, a chance to lead with grace and strength, to build a family where dignity replaces silence and fairness guides every step. I am no longer invisible. I am here, standing tall, ready to face whatever comes with open heart and unwavering resolve.